Hello, everyone, and welcome to Marvelous Movie Mondays. It's been a while since we've done a full-blown movie review. Not since Thor: Love and Thunder, and I guess if you count Werewolf by Night. But we're here
Mm,
with our review for the newest release in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I believe the 30th feature film, if I'm not mistaken, either 29th or 30th. I'm not sure, depending on if you count Werewolf by Night. But it is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, just released in theaters this past weekend. Critics have been seeing it for a few weeks. So we're a little late to the game in terms of reviewing it, but it's okay because we saw it without any prior knowledge of what it was going to be. I mean, we obviously knew it was going to be a tribute to Chadwick Boseman, which was the first and foremost most important thing. But there was a lot to talk about. There's a lot of stuff going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the movie spoiler free. We're going to talk a little bit just nonchalantly about what we thought maybe of the style, just our overall thoughts on the pacing or the editing or something like that. And then we can go into specifics of plot in our spoiler section. We will let you know clearly when we are talking spoilers. I'll have the little spoiler banner down there when it is time to do so. But Kelsey, how are you feeling a few days after our screening, talking about this movie? Were you satisfied? Because we got to admit, Phase 4 has been very hit or miss, and much more
mm,
miss than hit, in my opinion. I think
sure.
all the shows we got were either good or okay. I don't think there's any show that's been like excellent except for maybe WandaVision, but even then some people say it's kind of undermined by Multiverse of Madness, which is totally fair. And then the movies especially this year, I didn't like Multiverse of Madness or Thor: Love and Thunder. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts just as someone. First off, have you been liking Phase 4? Now that Phase 4 is complete, once we get the holiday special in a week, it'll be complete.
hmm
So, what do you think of Phase 4 up to now, and then after seeing Wakanda Forever, how do you feel?
Well, Dale, it's tricky because I feel like, yeah, there's been some duds, but I feel like, I don't know. I kind of blame the energy more of the fandom more
Mm,
than anything
okay.
else when it comes to the things that we're expecting and the things that we think that we
Mhm.
deserve and the things that we think that we like should be or need to be getting out of this
Mhm.
franchise, and our expectations and our desires are not fully meeting, like, there's a disconnect between what's happening on screen and what the fans want to happen. And like I feel
Mhm.
like that there's always going to be that, because at the end of the day, it's Kevin Feige and the creatives behind Marvel that get to decide what happened to these heroes. At the end of the day, it's like that's why they're the professionals. That's why they get, you know, the liberties to write these stories and
Right.
bring these characters to life. So I was thinking about this the other day and I was just like, I feel like Phase 4, we're letting the things that we found to not be so successful cloud our judgment about the things that were successes, in my opinion, in Phase 4.
Mhm. Right.
Because Phase 4 has produced some of my favorite things in the MCU. I mean,
Yeah.
Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings was freaking epic, awesome. I could watch that movie time and time again. Eternals, that's like, very controversial in the
We
fandom, but
love it. We
I
love it.
thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I thought Moon Knight was freaking awesome with
Mhm.
Oscar Isaac, his performance alone. Like there's been like some really, really good golden nuggets in Phase 4. And I feel like we can say that with every phase, though. I don't know why the fandom is specifically
Mhm.
attacking this phase and these newer projects. I don't, and
Well,
I hate to be like this, but is it because with this phase in particular, we've seen a lot more women on the screen? We've seen a lot more people of color on the screen and
yeah,
behind the scenes. Like, this has been our most diverse phase yet, for by
mhm.
a landslide,
Yeah.
and it's just I don't understand why this one is getting the most backlash, when really you can look at all three phases that came before this one and say, that one's not that great, but that one's good. Oh, this one was okay, but that one's really good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think the issue, and you totally bring up a good point with diversity and women, and this film specifically, we'll talk a lot about that
Mhm.
because I think that's some of the strong suit of the film is the diversity and the use of women in it. But I do think, in terms of a phase, when you think of, because essentially these are, I hate to say it, I don't want to denigrate these movies, but they're episodes in a longer series. Like it's a franchise, and they're not. You can't watch a movie now in the MCU standalone. Very rarely can you without having some sort of context, which came before. That's what made the first Black Panther specials. You really didn't need that context, and I think there are a lot of films now that rely on other movies and shows and stuff like that, which is why when you think of it as a series and you look at each phase essentially as a season of a show or a season of that series, it's like, what is the overarching theme? And I think that might be why at least I have a little bit of a hesitancy when I look at phase four, because phase one, it's, you're bringing the Avengers together and you're getting the gang, you know, ragtag team of superheroes. And then the season finale essentially is the Avengers. It's the team up, and then they accomplish their mission, they eat shawarma at the end. Phase two is
Mhm.
kind of like the fallout and the trauma of the Battle of New York. You see that with Iron Man 3 and Thor the Dark World
Mhm.
stuff with Loki, and then especially with Iron Man, and then leading to kind of the start of the clash between the two leaders, Iron Man and Cap. And that's kind of, I don't think Ant-Man is the best way to end phase two. I wish they had ended with Civil War, honestly. I don't think they should have
Sure.
started phase three with Civil War. I think Civil War should have been the end of phase two, because that's kind of what it was building to, with especially with Age of Ultron, the fact that Tony messes up and it causes tension, and then that tension builds to Civil War, which is the start of phase three. But then phase three being, of course, the Infinity Stone saga of like trying to get all the stones and then defeat Thanos. Like I think each phase, especially phase one and three, have their very clear overarching stories of like what the actual story of that phase is, and it somehow feels connected. Like you can watch a movie in that phase and kind of know that it relates to the overall story. Whereas I think phase four has struggled with that, and I think it's only because Endgame felt like such a conclusion, and Spider-Man
Mhm.
Far From Home was such an epilogue to Endgame with the whole Tony Stark and the glasses thing, that when you jump
Mhm.
into phase four and now it's like, okay, we're going back, and Black Widow's getting a prequel, and then Shang-Chi, which really has nothing to do with anything that's going on except for Iron Man 3, which is phase two, and then Multiverse of Madness, obviously dealing with the multiverse. There's a lot of multiverse stuff, but not every movie is related to the multiverse. So I think that's a kind of an issue people are having, is like, where does this all connect? Like, what is the overarching theme? And I actually saw, I hate to give him credit, but Soups posted a tweet. The kid who, Spider-Man No Way Home, the guy, the very energetic guy on TikTok and
Okay.
Twitter. He posted this whole thing about how like grief and pain is like and trauma is like the underlying theme, and I can kind of get on board with that, having seen now Wakanda Forever being obviously real life trauma that they're dealing with.
Mhm.
But like you look at it, WandaVision, similar. Multiverse of Madness, kind of extensive, an extension of that Wanda story. I mean, Thor: Love and Thunder deals a lot with grief and death, and Shang-Chi, especially with his parents. And I do kind of see that. And Spider-Man No Way Home also with Aunt May. So I get the whole trauma and grief thing. It's just like that's a theme that's prevalent in everything, but I think that's also stuff that we saw in the first three phases too. So I don't think that's like phase four's theme is grief and trauma.
Yeah.
But I do think as we go on, they clearly have a plan for Kang Dynasty. Like Kang is going to be the new like Thanos of the MCU, and then like
Mhm.
Secret Wars is going to be like kind of the end of the multiverse. So like they obviously know where they're going in terms of like they're going full fledged multiverse and Kang route. But I feel like Phase Four is kind of like that in between of, okay, we just finished the Thanos thing, we're going into the Kang multiverse stuff, but like what's this middle ground? And I think that's where at times this phase lost me, but I do agree with you. There are glimmers of good things in these phases. And Wakanda Forever, while I don't think it's a perfect film, we'll get to it, I think it's a very interesting, fitting end to this phase. Considering it's been very messy, I think this kind of brought us back to like just the not the roots of Marvel, but like it feels very much like it could be a phase three film just because it feels in a different vein. It doesn't feel as experimental. The visuals, I don't think, are as underdeveloped as some of the other shows. Like, I think they actually put
Sure.
time and effort into it. And that's been another thing with phase four, is just the actual budget and the restraint of visual effects because of how much demand and just how much they're producing. Because with all these series, phase four is the longest by a mile. Phase three has so
Mhm.
many films, but phase four was the longest by a mile because of all the shows. So like with that, you also have to cut on some budget costs and all that stuff. But so I think phase four has been hit or miss. But like you said, like there have been glimmers of good stuff. So I'm
And
excited though to talk about the season finale of phase four right now.
sure, yeah. And honestly, Dill, I do understand the criticism that's like Phase 4 has kind of felt like, well, where are we going? Like,
Hmm.
what's happening next? Like, what is this all leading up to? I understand that criticism, but I just feel like some pockets of the fandom, honestly, mostly men, are attacking every single individual project and saying
Right.
that nothing, that no part of Phase 4 has been good.
Mm.
Just like no, no TV show, no movie, like, they're attacking the individuals and not, saying, not just making a broad statement of like, "Oh, that was fine, it was good, it was entertaining, but I don't understand where it connects to this and why." You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
And then the
It just
one
it
that and then the one that everyone universally kind of champions, the one exception being No Way Home, which is A, Sony, not Marvel Studios, and B,
Mhm.
it's mostly about these three white guys, you know. And that's not to say
Right.
that it's not a good movie. I think it's a good movie, but I do think it is overrated, and I think a lot of it has to do
Yeah.
with nostalgia and stuff. And the other Phase 4 movies don't have the benefit of pulling characters you love from the past to come back in.
Right. Right.
Um, so yeah, very very interesting to talk about. But let's talk about this movie specifically, Wakanda Forever. I
Yes.
don't know if you brought a synopsis of how to sum this up because there's a lot going on. I think that's both a good thing and a bad thing.
I did to the best of my ability. I
All right,
don't
let's hear
even
it.
like, I couldn't really, it's really, really
Let's
broad.
hear it.
Okay,
Let's
these are
hear
the
it.
really broad strokes.
Hmm.
After the death of King T'Challa, Wakanda is left without their Black Panther as the world pressures them to share their most valuable resource, vibranium.
Yeah. I think that summed it up pretty well. Obviously, there's so many different side
Thank you.
plots which we'll get to, and some of them
Yes.
we can talk about here, and some of them we can talk about in the spoilers. Obviously, the first thing we have to talk about is T'Challa, and we knew in this that he obviously wasn't going to be in it for obvious reasons, but I was not sure if they were going to go the full fledged route of is it an illness and he dies? Is it are they just going to send him away somehow, like kind of what they did with Steve Rogers, where they're like, oh, he's on the moon, so we don't have to deal with Steve. He's happy, he's doing his
Sure.
own thing. And because I knew Nakia was in this, I was like, no, they didn't have him go off and have a happy life with Nakia. Like, it just wouldn't make
Right.
sense for any other story route but to kill off his character. But I did appreciate, and this is the very first scene, so I'm not. It's not like a spoiler that we need to like wait till the spoiler section to talk about. But it opens with his death and his funeral, and the death is off screen. The death
Mhm.
is it's you see it from obviously Shuri's point of view because she's trying to basically get the technology to save him. We don't know what the illness is, but and then obviously her mother delivers the news that he has passed, and then we get into the funeral, and then we get our title sequence, which is purely silent. It's just images
Mhm.
of Chadwick Boseman, very haunting.
Mhm.
Um, but I think this was a very respectful way to do this. Ryan Coogler had an impossible task with this. He really did. Like,
Mhm.
I don't think there's any way you could have made the movie you wanted to before Chadwick passed. There just was no way. You had
Yeah.
to address it because I'm sure there are bits and pieces you can obviously tell were there from the beginning before his passing, but then there's stuff you obviously needed to change, like especially with Shuri's involvement in this in the story, which we'll talk about, because she's kind of a central part of the action in a
Right.
lot of it. Um, but this whole beginning, I thought it was a tasteful way of doing this where you're making it you're not shying away from the fact that he was sick and he died, but also you're not just kind of leaving the fans wanting to know what happened. Like it's kind of the Glee thing with Finn. I don't know if
Mhm.
you watch Glee. Yeah, Corey
Yeah.
Monty. There was
No, I
like
know
a
exactly what
lot
you're
of
talking
people
about.
were like, "Well, why aren't you going to tell us what happened?" And it's like it's not about that.
That's not
It's
necessary
not. That's not what it's about. But at the same
because it was
time,
a real human being.
and some people were also like, "Well, we should see him die." And it's like we don't need that either.
No.
So I like that
No.
we still got a taste of the fact that he was sick. So at least we kind of have like a little bit of closure for the character, but also to just kind of give and I think this plays into the overall story for Shuri. Give her something character wise too, the fact that she couldn't save him because the whole thing has been that we have technology for everything. Everett
Mhm.
Ross gets his spine whatever fucked
Yeah.
up in the last one. Let's put this little bead on him. Oh, his spine's back to normal, vertebrae,
Yeah.
vertebrae. And it's like, that's kind of like her thing. It's like technology can fix anything. Da 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 da. And this is a very crushing moment where she finds out she can. And I think that was a really interesting way to kind of set her story in motion because we don't want it to all just be the characters mourning him because then we could just make that a Disney Plus documentary. This is about
Mhm.
the progression of these Wakandan characters too. We need to actually progress the story, and I think that was interesting to kind of give her a little bit of that, like, kind of I couldn't save him, and now I'm going down this deep path, dark path, which we see later in the film. So
Yeah.
I like that as an opening. But what did you think of this opening and this tribute? Because we've seen it in the trailers. It's the parade with everyone wearing white. So people
Yes.
have seen it in the trailers. They kind of knew that we were getting a funeral. Obviously, what did you think of this?
Dill, well, first of all, overall, I had nothing but good things to say about this movie. I really, really enjoyed
Interesting.
it a
Okay.
lot. I mean,
Cool.
I have a few things to touch on,
Right. Right.
but, this movie
Yeah.
was very tricky, but,
Hmm.
we'll get there when we get there. But that's one of the first things that I noticed still was how brilliant the visuals were. The costumes, the cinematography, the set design, immediately right away, like you're captivated because everything is just stunning. And I
Hmm.
loved the choice that everyone was wearing white rather than more traditionally you wear black when somebody dies. I loved how everyone was wearing white because it was more of like a lighthearted celebration of someone's life rather than
Hmm.
a mourning period. But obviously it's very, because I feel like Ryan Coogler knew that going into making this movie that it was going to be heavy enough for audiences to deal with this because it was a real life passing that happened, and
Hmm.
it's just so real, and I couldn't even imagine being an actor in this film and carrying out this funeral sequence,
Hmm.
and like this was actually a person that you knew, like it feels very much like a mourning period, like a send off for T'Challa, but also like for Chadwick Boseman,
Hmm.
obviously. And
Yeah.
it just, it's a deep cut through and through the whole time.
Yeah.
I was like already crying. I was crying. I was welling up
Yeah.
all throughout the film, right off
And
the bat, at
and
the
I
end,
and I
everywhere.
envy you. I envy you for that because and this is something that should never play into anyone's thoughts on a movie, but the movie-going experience does affect sometimes the way we view things. And the people
Oh,
sitting behind us, they were
yes. Yep.
four guys, they were probably teenagers, laughing, cracking up, spilling
Making
their
jokes,
popcorn, making
talking
jokes during this opening sequence. They got
during
better as
this.
the film went along because I think the film kind of hooked them in. But I think, like Okoye started crying and they were like, like I was like, wow, you guys are disrespectful. And I do think that like
Gross.
this movie opening on such a somber note, like kind
Mhm.
of a bittersweet note, like you said, like it's a celebration of his life, but it is still a sad note. Like
Mhm.
to for that to be the part they're gonna talk through and like, come on, man, like
No, yeah.
that really annoyed me, and I think I just could not get into the film yet until maybe
Yeah.
20, 30 minutes in because the whole time I was like, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, and I didn't want to say because I hate being that guy to be like shh, because obviously also I don't want to ruin others' experiences around me, and I don't want to be that Karen in the audience
Right.
shushing other people because this movie is for everyone. It should be for everyone, and if that's their way of responding to it, that is. But it just ruined my movie going experience, and
Mhm.
it sucked because I really wanted to get into it. So like that first scene didn't hit as emotionally for me just because I didn't have the attention to give it. But yeah, I think. But the good thing about this movie, though, is throughout the film we get so many scenes about his legacy and the conversations between the characters, and I honestly think those are the strongest parts of the films, are the ones where the characters are just kind of sitting and talking and reflecting. That moment with Angela Bassett where she kind of like her line from the movie, the "I have no one, my whole family's gone," and like that whole moment
Mhm.
hits even harder in context. Like, and I think that's one thing I want to talk about too is the acting. The acting here is some of the best. I think it's even better than
Mhm.
the original. I think Michael B. Jordan's performance in the original is still my favorite performance in the MCU, but like the overall collective ensemble here is the strongest acting I've seen in any MCU project, which is so awesome to see because like even the new characters, which we'll talk about, like really brought a lot acting wise, but the ones we know,
Mhm.
like Denai Guerrera, bringing everything she can to this Okoye character, and she goes through her own arc. Her story is
Mhm.
mostly in the first act. She kind of is a little bit more of a supporting side character in the second and third act, but she still has such a great arc, and her emotions are 'cause she's lost him twice. She saw him fade to dust. She's the only one to see him die,
Mhm.
for real. Like and obviously we have an idea that Ramonda also saw him die like the second time, but
Mhm.
she saw the fade to dust, so she's had to live through this twice. And then Ramonda being the mother, and then we speculated like, well, why does she say no families there? Because Shuri's around, and we're not going to spoil what she means, but in that moment, she is alone and she feels alone without T'Challa or Shuri in that moment, and she has to kind of like react to that and to see how she has to carry the burden of being queen because she never wanted to. It was her son, and she figured that his future generations would be the kings as well. She would never have to deal with that mantle, and it's sad. And then Shuri,
Mhm.
obviously, being the one who thought she could save them and couldn't. Those three characters especially have such amazing arcs, and the performances from Angela Bassett, from Denai Guerrera, and from Letitia Wright are just phenomenal. And I loved every bit of them, and Winston Duke as well, because
Yeah.
he doesn't have as much to do in the beginning of the film. He has a little bit more at the end, but he has like some really nice moments too with those characters and
Yeah.
their interactions with one another and talking just about death and grieving and different perspectives. I think that's the strongest point of this film. And honestly, that should have been the
Mhm.
priority, not the action, not the introduction of new characters for future series, not teasing future villains, not
Yeah.
the visuals, which are good, like you said. I have some qualms with some of them, but like not the CGI and stuff. It should have always been Chadwick was the priority, and it was. And that's what I think is the best thing about this film is the tribute, is that sense of remembrance. It's quite beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely, Dill. It just felt like I'm obviously like something different. Like there was just something different about the cast in this. Like there was like they were all just solely taking care of one another
Mm,
on screen together. You know what I mean? Like there was
yeah.
just this camaraderie, there was this understanding. It really felt like we were watching a family really deal with a passing and a mourning period, and it was just really beautiful to watch. And there was, I loved Winston Duke in this. I thought M'Baku had some great moments. There's some great moments with him and Shuri, with like him giving her advice and just being there for her and saying like, oh well, I promised your brother. And we can kind of see that through the last movie, through what T'Challa had done for the Jabari in the last film. There's a better relationship now between the other tribes
Hmm.
and the Jabari. So it's great to see them, kind of working hand in hand. You said this right in the beginning, but this was one of my favorite parts still, was obviously the score was beautiful.
Mm,
But it was really the use of silence in this film that was really, really powerful and I think
hmm.
really, really effective. Like you
When the
said, we
audience
got
wasn't talking.
when the audience wasn't talking. Oh my god. And like you said, we got our whole Marvel intro. It was all clips of Chadwick throughout the movies, and that was completely in silence. And then there's our whole ending scene at the end is in silence, and we're just like really sitting with the weight of what had happened in this film and what
Mhm,
this means for a certain character in this film. And it was just really, really a really beautiful, beautiful film.
mhm. Yeah, so, let's get into some of, like, the actual superhero specifics and not details of the plot, obviously, because spoilers, but this whole other Namor storyline, this is kinda where we bring in the new
Hmm.
characters. We're introduced to Riri Williams, our
Yes,
Ironheart,
we
which
are.
you had forgotten was in the trailer and we had
Yeah, I
talked about,
just
but
completely missed
no,
that. I was
it's
not
fine.
paying attention.
That's the luxury of not overanalyzing shit and spending too much time on Twitter. But it was exciting to see her. But she is the kind of the catalyst for this whole like Kelsey said, this vibranium war essentially,
Mhm.
in the fact that she has this device, right, that she made that she can
Yeah,
like seek
it's
out
able to
vibranium,
detect vibranium
and they
and
find out that vibranium is actually found elsewhere aside from Wakanda, and it's in this
yes.
underwater kingdom led by Namor. And we knew we were getting Namor, and I think this is the stuff that was always going to be in it. I think this was the stuff that, regardless of Chadwick's passing, was going to be the central part of this movie was Namor trying to conserve his precious resources of vibranium. And there's obviously the third party being the Americans, which I think is the weakest part of the film, which we'll talk about. But like the idea that America, there's some instant there's some instance that happens on a ship, an ocean liner, and there's these underwater people. I forget the names of their species or whatever, but they are able to basically put someone in a trance or hypnosis. And there's this really
Mm,
haunting scene where all these people are like walking off the side of the ship and just basically committing suicide off the side of the ship into the water. And it's really harrowing, and that's kind of like the underwater powers or whatever.
mhm.
And so the Americans think that the Wakandans were the ones who were responsible for that tragedy, but in reality, it was the underwater people. And then you see how the Wakandans, in order to try to like clear their name, need to use the underwater people. Try to like you kind of make some deal with them. But also then the idea of the resource with vibranium comes into play. So it's a lot of the politics, kind of like what we saw in the first film of like how you're sharing your resources, who you're sharing your resources with, what are your relations to other countries and other nations and other tribes. And that's all very interesting. I think that's always been like kind of the thing that Black Panther has been, is like the real life talks of resources and exchanges between different cultures and tribes, and what
Mhm.
having that privilege of being, the ones who have the vibranium, what that responsibility comes with that. Like, I think those are very interesting topics that this film brings to light even more. I do think, this was a very smart way to bring Dominique Thorne into this as Riri Williams, because then
Mhm.
all you have to do is say, oh, wait, there's this device that's detecting vibranium. And instead of just saying, oh, we found a device, why not just make this the introduction of Ironheart? I didn't mind that. I know a lot of people have been complaining
Mhm.
about, like, oh, every movie's just trying to set up a future series and stuff. But I don't think this was setting up a future series for her. I think this was giving her a really nice arc in this story and then saying, well, we might see her again. And I don't think this
Yeah.
was necessarily to advertise Ironheart as much as it was to just have her be an effective point of this story. Obviously, you lose a little just because she didn't know T'Challa in this universe, so like she doesn't really play a big part into the mourning aspect, but she's there for a lot of the actual action, the actual superhero part of the movie. So I actually really
Yeah.
liked her character, and then Tina Huerta as Namor. Incredible. I mean, I think the villains in Black Panther movies are really solid because
Yeah.
they're not villains. They're
Yes.
anti-heroes, as Taylor Swift would
Yeah.
say. That she's it's the idea of like he has his own goals and ambitions, not because he's trying to be malice. He's not. There's no malice behind it, but because that's his people. He's trying to protect his people just like they are
Yeah.
trying to protect the Wakandans, and it's very valid. And you kind of see both sides, especially as the film progresses, and you see some of the characters that we love kind of consumed by grief and consumed essentially by evil, in the fact that they're like, they're going through shit. You sometimes side with Namor at times, which I think is a very
Yeah.
interesting dynamic that I really like to see play out. What did you think of the Namor stuff and the Ironheart stuff, and just these new characters in general?
Well, Dill, since I had forgotten that Ironheart was gonna be in this, I don't even remember what happened. I think my brain turned off when we started talking about that or something. But so all of a sudden they're talking about a student from MIT who invented this thing, and I'm thinking, well, who are some students that we know at MIT now? And
Yeah,
I was
Ned
like,
and
wait, is
MJ
Ned and MJ in this? Like, what's
and
going on?
what's his name? Flash.
Oh, yeah, Flash.
You
Yeah,
made it
I
in.
forget he's at MIT too. And so we met her and I was like, "Oh my god, like this is so cool." And I don't even think that I realized that it was like the character of Ironheart until
Yeah,
like she until I don't know if this is a spoiler,
it's in the
but
trailer. It's in the trailer.
the suit?
Not the suit, but
Oh,
she
with
like clinks the
the
armor and this little
literal
iron
heart
heart
of
falls. So
iron.
yeah, yeah,
That okay. Well, she like invented her own little iron woman suit, if you will. And then that's when it clicked for me. But yeah, and then what else did you ask me? The
Namor.
villain. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was really cool. His
Little
wings on
wings.
his ankles freaked me out. I didn't like it at all.
It's
I
an
didn't
interesting
like looking
design.
at
Yeah, yeah.
him.
Okay.
'Cause I'm like, how do you I guess it's the same thing where Iron Man has, like, his he flies from his feet too and his
Mhm.
hands, because I was just trying to, like, think about the semantics of, like, how he, like, guides himself and how he, like, really, because I 'cause I'm thinking if you only have wings on your feet, you're gonna hang upside down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're superheroes, Kels. That's the answer.
But anyway, yeah, 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 that's
um,
okay, right, that's it. This
yeah.
doesn't exist in real life. Right, right, right. Thank you for reminding me.
No, I'm
But
kidding. I'm kidding.
I
Um,
liked him because he never really got, like, loud or crazy or, like, over the top about anything. Like, everything that he it was all very, like, calm, cool, collected. It was just like, "No, this is, like, what I have to do now, and either you can help me out with this, or now you're an enemy of my people, like, your
right.
choice." Like, it
Yeah.
was very menacing in a very low key way, and it's like you
Kind of
said,
like
Dill, like, it's
Killmonger.
because there exactly. Well, he was very scary with his scars and, like, he was like,
Right,
"I
right, but it was
so
more
many
low key.
kills, I gotta."
It was more like you want to mess with me, I'll mess with you. Like very
Yeah,
chill,
yeah.
which is kind of scary. And the other new character, Michaela Cole's character, she was one of the Dora Milaje. I forget her name. Was it I'll get it in
She's
like 30. Aneka.
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 Yes.
So she's obviously from the show I May Destroy You on HBO. She was like this huge star, and they got her for this movie, which was a huge get. I would have liked to see a little bit more with her character, just because it's kind of like just another Dora Milaje. It's just the fact that she's a named celebrity. It's like we're kind of giving a little bit more weight with her. I would have liked to see a little more with her. I think the Dora Milaje in itself, Okoye too, is a little sidelined after that first act. She has a lot of stuff to do in the first act, then after that, it's like we barely
Hmm.
see her, and it's a little sad. And we'll talk in spoilers about what they do with her character that I do not like at all. Um,
Oh,
but
interesting.
yeah, which a lot of people seem to agree with me on. But another thing we have to talk about is Martin Freeman, because this poor guy, we love him. We love him. He's great.
I
We love
love
his
him.
character, but he did not need to be in this movie. And I think that's where a lot of the complaints have come, is the fact that this movie is long and it feels a little long. And they already have to
No,
tackle
I
so
didn't
much with
feel long.
the Namor stuff and the, because it's a 3 hour movie. There's the Namor stuff, and then there's also the tribute stuff with, what you would call it, um, the Chadwick, and you have those two, and they don't always come together all the time perfectly. Like I think it's a lot of them exist on their own, and sometimes they cross over. Mostly with Shuri. Shuri's kind of the tie between the two, but it feels like there's two different things going on, because there were like the Namor thing is what the original story was intended to be, and then we had to add all the stuff with T'Challa because of what happened, obviously. And again, like I said, I don't envy Ryan Coogler; he had a tough job. But then we have this other side plot, which is like what I talked about, the Americans, where America wants to blame Wakanda for what happens on the
Hmm.
ship, but Everett Ross is kind of like the face of the
He's like the
defense against,
spokesperson. He's like
yeah,
the
for
Lorax
Wakanda.
for the Wakandans.
And I'll be completely honest, I don't think you needed him in this movie. And there's another character that I think was not promoted in marketing that we'll get to in a bit in
Hmm.
spoilers, but like that whole side plot, if they had done something with their characters and maybe gotten them to some sort of like really nice character resolution between the two of them, I would have been like, oh, cool, cool. But they didn't really do anything with them either. It was just kind of like, oh, there's this tidbit of information we're given about Martin Freeman and this other character, but they don't really
Mm.
go anywhere with it. And it's like, if he's not in this movie, does anything change? Probably not. I really don't think it does. Like they could easily get, obviously, yes, he does things for them in this movie, but you could obviously have another character do it. And I think every
Hmm.
time it cut back to him, I was like, it's great to see you back, but like we don't need you here. We really don't. And I think it's one of those things where it's like a Black Panther movie, you need him in it, but it's like we also, we lost Chadwick, so it's like all bets are off at this point. Like we don't need this or that, this and that. There's another
Hmm.
character that we see as well that was spoiled that he was in the movie a while ago, but I don't think many people saw him coming still. But another character, which we'll talk about in spoilers, but like I think that was used effectively. Whereas Martin Freeman, I just don't think I think they really just didn't know what to do with him. And I think maybe if Chadwick hadn't passed, he would have been a bigger part of it, because it would have just been the Namor and America stuff and the politics and all that. But I think because you now have this other whole thing to tackle, Martin Freeman just really feels like an afterthought. And you probably disagree, because you said you love this movie and you loved him. But did you not feel that at all? Just that he kind of detracted, or is it your love for
Well,
Martin Freeman just kind of blinding you?
still, my opinion's pretty biased because I do love Martin Freeman a lot. I like him a
And I
lot.
do too. I do.
So I would probably like the Lord of the Ring movies then.
The Hobbits, yeah, you would love it. He's
The
great in them.
Hobbits? Okay.
Yeah, he's in the
Sorry.
first.
I
Yeah,
don't know
that's okay.
this from that. But anyway, but I think that it was a really powerful storyline for, the Americans to just jump to the conclusion of like wanting to place the blame on the Wakandans, and like obviously they're the ones up to this. Like they're not wanting to share the vibranium with us. Like they're, no, whatever. And I thought that it was, it was good representation of a character of a person who's not a person of color to
Mm,
kind of speak on their behalf and be like, whoa, 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 let's not get crazy now.
right.
Um so I thought that that was a powerful storyline that I think, I get what you're saying. It didn't need to be in the film. There's already a lot going on, but I'm
Mhm.
I like
It's
seeing
okay.
it, so I
Um,
like him.
yeah, the last thing I want to talk about before we get into spoilers, and spoilers is going to kind of iron out a little bit, iron out a little bit of just like my deeper thoughts in this film, because I don't think it's perfect. I think there's, like I said, like there are two main stories going on, and they don't always come together always, and it does feel long. I did feel the length, and again, maybe it's the audience members behind me. I don't know. Um, but the visuals, and you talked about it. I think whenever it's practical, it's beautiful. Like the costumes, the use of Wakandan culture, the designs of these characters, the score, everything's good. The CGI itself is also pretty good. Like it's not distracting. It doesn't look fake. The only qualm I have is the the photography, the cinematography in the nighttime sequence and the underwater sequences. Because the nighttime sequence, there's this whole fight that takes place kind of like on a bridge over water, and there's
Oh,
characters
okay.
fighting, and there's some light, but it was just too much. And you haven't watched Game of Thrones, but there's this episode of Game of Thrones called like the Night Watch or something like that, and it's or the night, and it's like all takes place at night, and you could barely see a thing. Only when the dragons breathe fire can you see things, and I hate that because it's like this is an action movie. I want to be able to see the action. And I felt like the South Korea fight in the last movie was so much better lit because you had all those like very vibrant street signs, and the car was kind of had this purple tinge to it, and like there was a lot of color. Here it was like, because you didn't have the Black Panther suit to kind of emanate this color, there was just a lot of darkness, and it was hard to make out where the characters were, what the action was. And the people who are from the sea are also blue, so their skin was also kind of blending in with the background of the night. Like it was
Sure.
very hard to decipher what was going on, so that was distracting. And then when they went underwater, I get it, they wanted to try to make it look more realistic, but realistically, when you go down deep into the water, it's murky, it's grimy, it's hard to see, it's cloudy, there's sand and whatever, it's murky, muddy. I think in a comic book movie, and I think Aquaman is a great example of it, you can kind of make it look a little less realistic in order to see what's going on. And I was like,
Okay, sure.
the whole time I was squinting, I was like, this is kind of it's an eyesore. I was like, oh my god, like this is, and considering how nice the visuals were in the first film, and the CGI rhinos I didn't love, but like the actual visuals are very good in the first film. So this film, I was like, oh, he's gonna bring a lot of great sense of style. And then when they went underwater, I was like, oh, this is an ugly mess. And I'm not saying that it took away from the movie completely, but they spend so much time in that second act underwater. They spend like a good probably 20-30 minutes there. I'm like, ooh, this is like, it's not nice to the eye. At least it was not very visually aesthetically appealing, and I would have just rather them made it look a little bit more cartoonish and a little bit more vibrant for the sake of our, the cinema and the screen, and just translating something cinematically, than trying to keep it realistic and be like, no, but this is how it would actually look underwater. And I think there's a reason why there are very few movies set underwater, is because it's murky, it's cloudy, it's not easy to see. And there's this one
Sure.
section where like there's this like underwater sun, and it shines this light, and I'm like, finally, and then it goes away. I'm like, okay. So
No.
like, I just would have liked a little bit better cinematography and lighting in those sequences. But again, that's like a nitpick, like I think
Mhm.
considering what Phase 4 has been visually with CGI, I think this was definitely a step up in terms of just the visual scope of things. I think that also comes down to Ryan Coogler knowing what he's doing, and knowing when to use visuals and when not to, like when to just make it these characters and their costumes and in this lovely culture. Like there's this whole beach, or kind of beach sequence in this little village, this fight, and there's like a lot of flooding and stuff, and there are visual effects with the water, but it's mostly just these people on shore fighting. And I think that's the best fight sequence. That and the end fight sequence is all brought in broad daylight, and I like how they're kind of not just resorting to the gray aesthetic that I mentioned in like Shang-Chi and Black Widow, this kind of dark, murky aesthetic. I like how they mostly kept things in daylight, where we could see the action, where we can see the
Yeah.
beautiful costumes. The only things I didn't like were when they went underwater, because it just kind of got a little too murky and cloudy for me. But again, that's me being nitpicky. I kind of blame myself for um, some of that criticism, because I know a lot of other people didn't really mind it. But yeah, I just man, those underwater sequences were just so ugly. But again, it's one thing in a bigger movie, and I think
Sure.
because the movie is almost 3 hours long, it's like, okay, 20 minutes isn't going to kill you. So
I get what you're saying, Dill.
yep.
I I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I didn't really take anything away from me, at least not in the moment.
Hmm.
Maybe when I do a rewatch, I'll check out
Yeah.
those scenes a little bit harder and be like, this could be better. Um, but
But
you want to
anything
get
else you want
into
to hit
the
on? I was going to say before we get into spoilers,
spoiler
is there
because
anything
my
else?
nitpicks have to do with spoilers.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. So, I think, just a blanket statement, I liked it. I think you liked it a little bit more than I did, but I do think it is a fitting tribute first and foremost to Chadwick, and that is why I think people should see it, and that's why I think it is a success. I think it is the best of the three movies we've gotten this year, because it does pay tribute to him in a very honorable way. And while I do think there are a lot of plots that didn't need to be there, and there's a lot of stuff that's odds sometimes. I think they always bring it back around to him and his legacy, which I think is important. And I do like what they did with all the women characters in progressing their stories and, giving them a little bit more range and, like not making it so one note at times. Because like in the last one, it's like, Shuri's just this kind of fun kid who likes inventing things. And now like she's got a lot of deep shit to deal with. And we
Yeah,
get a lot more with Ramon, a lot more with Okoye. So like I do think this film is good. I still don't think it's excellent. I don't think it's a top tier Marvel movie. I don't think it comes close to the first one. I think the first one's just a more solid little package than this. I think this is a little bit
sure.
overblown, but again, this is such an impossible task. So the fact that Kugler pulled it off at all is impressive for me.
Yeah.
And what are your final like thoughts before we go into spoilers?
This movie, one of my notes that I wrote down when I was putting together my thoughts for this podcast was just the note, "Yay, women!" Like
Yeah. Mhm.
this movie is filled with so much badass women, so many badass women. It's like they all like you know we lost an incredible talent and force of nature, and we were kind of just filled with this overwhelming
Mhm.
presence of just these amazing characters of Queen uh Ramonda, Shuri, Okoye, Nakia, Riri Williams. Like it just made my heart happy because I
Mhm.
was like, oh my god,
Yeah.
look at these women.
Cool.
I love it.
So it's a
Love it.
recommendation for both of us. When we get to like the end of the year for December, I'm planning some like year ends, like looking at all the movies and all the shows and all the villains and stuff, and kind
Sure.
of like updating those rankings that we've done. So we'll talk about where this fits into the overall phase later. But we're gonna transition to spoilers now. So we're about 42 minutes in. So spoilers are on. Lots to talk about. Um,
Hmm.
obviously spoiler stuff. Where do you want to start with spoiler stuff? I feel like maybe
Um,
we could just talk about the overall uh, Black Panther story with
yeah, that
Shuri
feels like a
first.
good
Yeah,
good a place to start as any.
because I think the trailers kind of gave it away. I mean, it's Shuri. We
It
kind of
was the
knew it would be.
poster for me, Dill, where it's
Mm,
like her in the middle and then whoever is in the suit in front of them. And so I was like,
yeah,
okay, well, it's Shuri. You just told
yeah.
me with this poster.
Yeah,
Um,
and I don't mind that. I think that makes the most sense, especially with this
right.
story, what we're getting. And I really think her storyline was the highlight for me. I think it had like the best range in terms of, I like the idea that she didn't really allow herself to get over the death, and she like it ended up consuming her to where when she like goes to this the ancestral plane, she sees Killmonger. That's another spoiler, even though
Yeah.
I thought people knew he was in this movie. A lot of people were surprised, but like I thought he was in it, and I called it. I even whispered to you, I was like, I think this is where we're gonna see Michael B. Jordan, because I was like, where are they
Yeah.
going to fit him in? I was like, they
Yeah.
need to fit him in, and he's dead. So I'm like, oh, he's probably going to show up in some vision or some dream or something. And then when she went to the ancestral plane and they didn't turn the throne around, I was like, okay, there it is.
Yeah. I
But
think
it was
honestly,
nice.
Dill,
Yeah, sorry, go
we
ahead.
had talked about in past episodes like what we were kind of predicting like where he was going to be, and I think you had said like maybe he'll show up in the ancestral plane. I was just like, yeah, maybe, like,
Because
I
that's
don't
where the
know.
dead people show up. Yeah,
Right,
and
right.
and it was a good way to not make it so like because realistically, if T'Challa died, he would be in the ancestral
He
plane
would
for
be
her.
there.
But
Right,
because you can't use the actor, and if they had done
right.
CGI, I would have immediately given this half a star. I would have been like, "That's disrespectful." But like
Yeah,
they didn't,
yeah,
thank God. But like the thing is, like I think that was an interesting twist because then it's like you don't need to make it. You have a valid excuse because then you can make it that this darkness is succumbing her, and that she's like letting this grief kind of make her not evil, but kind of give her this darker nastiness inside of her, which I think is so effective in that final
yeah.
battle. Like that's where I was talking about with the Namor Shuri stuff. Like you really kind of side with Namor at times because like Shuri is kind of essentially being the anti-hero too. She's not standing
Mhm.
for anything her brother did. And in that final moment when she finally decides to let him live, like that is so powerful. And that's why I think her arc is so good because it starts in an interesting place, it goes to an even darker place, and then it ends in an interesting place. And then the coda at the end, which we'll talk about too. But like I really liked her arc, especially
Mhm.
like of all the arcs. Like I said, Okoye, the fact that she was, kind of thrown aside and said, "You're not a Dora Milaje anymore." Like I thought that was interesting, but then they didn't do anything interesting with her for the rest of the movie. We'll talk about her suit in a bit, which I hate. But like, but
Yeah.
but I think Shuri consistently from beginning to end had a great arc, and Ramonda too. But obviously, for obvious reasons, she didn't have an arc at the end. But what did you think of Shuri's arc? And then we can also talk about Okoye's and Ramonda's.
So I agree with you, Dill. Shuri being the Black Panther is what makes the most sense. I think that's where most people were expecting the story to go. Being that I think it has to be someone in the royal family. I don't think it like can branch out to anyone else.
I don't.
But
Well, it's also
I
tricky now with
was,
the heart-shaped herb, which we also speculated on. We're like, what happens now? And we saw that
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
big
That was
plot
also
point 'cause
another one of our
the fact
questions
of the
that
matter
gets
is they don't
answered.
have the heart-shaped herb, so they can't keep him alive, and essentially she has to kind of use uh, the sea people's technology to kind of create a new heart-shaped
Yes,
herb, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I don't know if it has to be in the family, but I just assumed when the heart shaped herb died, they were like, oh, no more Black Panthers. Like we're gonna let it die with T'Challa, which was also kind of
sure.
interesting too because it kind of like gave a little bit more to Shuri again, like to be like, no, I don't want another Black Panther. I want my brother, which
Yeah.
was heartbreaking to see, and that's where I think it really ties back around to Chadwick, and that stuff really works.
Right. So she ends up, making a synthetic heart-shaped herb that's able to give her the power and the strength of Black Panther. Um and I don't know, I was kind of part of me was kind of hoping that it was going to be a Okoye cuz I for me that felt like the most appropriate for the job. Like she's
Hmm.
this badass warrior general, like she has like such a unique fighting style to her. Like she's just a queen. She's badass. So I was
Mhm.
just like, I think it should be a Koye, but whatever.
Well, what did you think of
Um,
Okoye's story? Like, did you like it? Because I thought it was very. The first act is very interesting. The fact that she couldn't save T'Challa, obviously, no one could, but then that she couldn't save
mhm.
Shuri either, and that's where you get the Ramonda. My whole family's gone because at that point they think
Yeah,
Shuri is probably toast because she's dragged underwater. But like
right.
Okoye, like I think it was so interesting that she lost that mantle, and like then when Ramonda said it, she was like, "You're right," and she kind of walked away, and that's powerful. And
Yeah.
honestly, I like the idea of her being like this civilian and helping and showing that she didn't need to be a Dora Milaje to be this fighter, to be this help. But then at the end, they're like, "No, but you still need to be a superhero, so we're going to give you another Iron Man suit because we're giving everyone Iron Man suits." And I'm like,
Mm,
Spider Man has an Iron Man suit. We saw in Infinity War that Hulk had an Iron Man suit. Like everyone's getting an Iron Man suit. And I'm like, it doesn't need to though. Like the whole thing about Okoye is that she was skilled on her own. She didn't
right.
need a
She
suit.
didn't need
She didn't need
any
that.
like
And
tech.
so, and I
She
also think
literally
the
fought with
actual
a
suit
spear.
itself, I think the suit itself looks very tacky. Like I don't think it looks cool. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's
like, it
ugly.
just it's an ugly suit. So I was like, you gave her an ugly suit and you kind of showed her that, oh no, you need to be flying around shooting lasers out of your hands to be of any benefit to us. And it's like, no, like the whole thing is that she's now able to be a civilian and her and Nakia are these civilians helping others. And I was just so frustrated with what they did with the Koye's character because, like you said, she is the most badass. And it's like she
Yeah.
didn't need a suit. And I like the idea of stripping the Dora Milaje name from her. That's fine. It's just what they
Yeah.
did after that. I'm like, oh, come on. Yeah, I was frustrated.
No, yeah, that's super power it was a super powerful moment because, like, you don't, like, expect that of Queen Ramonda.
Hmm.
Like, you would never assume that, like if you told me in, Black in 2018 when we watched Black Panther 1 for the first time, it was like, "Oh, but she's gonna lose her title in the next one, just wait." I would be like, "No, she doesn't. She's loyal to the crown. She serves her
Hmm.
life to the royal family." Like, absolutely not. Like, so it was an intense moment for this character and for the audience, and I think that it allowed Okoye to go through this
Hmm.
little arc of her own throughout the story,
Yeah.
which is good because how I love when they make women
Yeah.
multidimensional and not just
Right.
give
Yeah, and that's why
make
I
them the
think
girlfriend in the
I think
story.
giving her the suit then kind of took away that it made her more one-dimensional, I think, which sucked.
No, I
Um,
get what you're
yeah,
saying.
but
My biggest complaint about the suit is that it's just simply ugly, and they address it in the movie that it's ugly, and I'm like, then fix it. Then fucking fix it. I thought that someone was gonna like give it a different design, and then it was gonna be like, oh, and Okoye is gonna come out wearing it. She's gonna be like, yeah, this is much better. Like this is more me. But that never happened, and I was like, okay, well, don't say that it's ugly and then not fix it.
yeah, and it just sucks because that's gonna be like the future of Okoye is that suit, and I
I don't
whatever.
know. The Iron Man suit's kind of morphed throughout the
Yeah,
movies.
yeah,
Maybe
true,
they'll
true.
update this one a little bit more.
And then along that line though, Io also like the fact that then she took the mantle, but we got
Mhm,
very little of her. It's like she's the next build after Winston Duke. Like if you look at the cast in the credit order of how they're built, it's Letitia
mhm.
Wright, Lupita Nyong'o, Denai Guerrero, which makes sense. They're the three lead women of this. Then Winston Duke, and then Florence Kasumba, who plays Io. And I'm like, she was barely in it for me. Like they
Mm,
didn't do anything with her character. Angela
yeah,
Bassett's last because she has the and Angela Bassett at the end, but um so I would say Angela Bassett's the next biggest lead after those three women. But after Winston
yeah,
Duke, it's Florence Kasumba, and I don't think they utilized her well at all. Io, especially with Okoye, they could have given a scene between the two of them where Io's like talking to her too. Like I don't know, I would have liked to see a little bit more with Io, especially because they try to
sure.
make her a big part of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So
Yeah.
not sure. Um, what
My
were you gonna
biggest
say, Kelsey? Yeah.
complaint, Dill, honestly, with all of this was how Shuri became the Black Panther
Okay.
because, she said in the beginning of the film, she was like, because her mother was asking her, like, "Oh, how have you come with like making the herb?" And she's like, "No, I'm not. I don't want another herb. Like, I want my brother." Like you said, I'm so sorry if that was just like a very loud bump. I accidentally hit my microphone. Um, But then all of a sudden, she, unlocks the code to making the synthetic herb, and and then it's her, Nakia, and she's like, "Okay, well, just give it to me." And I was like, I don't know. I felt like there should have been more of like a buildup, even
Mm.
more of like if it was her, Nakia, and Okoye, like even if there was just this moment of like, well,
Who's gonna do
who's
it?
gonna
Yeah.
take it? Well, and like Shuri even has like a moment where she's like, "Well, it can't be me because like I'm not my brother. Like I can't take up this
Mm.
mantle. Like whatever." Like she has this moment of doubt, and then they have a moment where they convince her, like, "No, you're absolutely like the right person for the job for these X amount of reasons." And I feel like that would have filled the scene a little bit more. It
Mhm.
maybe would have made her becoming the next Black Panther make more sense to people like me who thinks that it should be a different character. Um, but she was just kind of like, "Well, give it to me and we'll see how this goes." And I was like, that was kind of lame."
Yeah, no,
um,
that's a valid point.
I
Um,
There's another death that we have to talk about in this
yeah,
movie.
and this is where Queen Ramonda dies, obviously, and it's a tragic death, like heartbreaking. She does it saving Riri Williams, who's drowning.
Yeah.
Um, and it is very sad. I think this is something that was going to be in the movie either way. Before Chadwick died, I think the
Right.
fact that Chadwick passed, though, making another main character die,
Mhm.
it just was a little. I honestly wish because Chadwick had passed, they had just let Ramonda live in this one, and then
Yeah,
maybe
I
in the
agree.
third, in like a third movie, had her pass away. Because I do think this was going to be a big pivotal moment for T'Challa in this movie, but because T'Challa died, they needed to like to do something else. But he still wanted that Queen Ramonda death, and it's a powerful death. It's a very agonizing, heartbreaking death. But it's also
Mhm.
like we had just finished the mourning of Chadwick, and this whole movie's mourning Chadwick. That it's like
Mhm.
then it feels like we're not giving enough service to Ramonda and Angela Bassett's character. But then also it's like when we are mourning Angela Bassett's character, it's like, oh, do we forget about T'Challa? And that's where it's kind of tough because it's like
Yeah.
Angela Bassett, like Ramonda loses T'Challa, thinks she loses Shuri, and then she's like, I've lost my whole family. But then Shuri comes back, but then she dies. So now Shuri's like, I lost my whole family. It just felt a little repetitive. And I think that moment, it's while powerful, I do think we didn't necessarily need it. Maybe it could
Yeah.
have been like one of those things where, uh, spoiler alert, in the Last Jedi in Star Wars, Princess
Oh
Leia.
my
No,
god.
it's not a big spoiler. It's not a big spoiler. Um, it's not a big spoiler. Someone's in a. I'm not gonna say who it is. I'm not gonna say
Okay.
who it is, but someone is like essentially in like a little bit of a coma for a period of
Okay.
time, and they think she's gone, but then she like
Snow
wakes
White.
up. Yeah, like yeah, kind of. It's not even an elongated coma. It's like literally like 5 minutes or whatever. Or actually, no, it's a little longer. But anyway, it could have been that thing where Ramona gets really hurt and she's like on life support or whatever. And then when they get the heart shaped herb, that's when they're able to save Ramona. And then Ramona says, now you become the Black Panther. That would have been a better choice, I think. Like have the heart
Mm.
shaped herb be what saves Ramonda. And then Ramonda tells Shuri, you got to do it now. Because then it's like we don't have to mourn a whole nother character because this film is already mourning so much. And yes, Angela
Yeah.
Bassett's still alive, but it's like it's kind of the end game thing of Iron Man's death totally took away from Black Widow's. And I think that's
Mm.
kind of this one too, where I think T'Challa's death was always going to be the priority to where now when Ramonda dies, it's not as big a thing. Or when it is a big thing, it takes away from T'Challa. Like I don't know. I didn't think we need this big character death on top of what we already got. I think it's emotional
Yeah.
already enough. And Shuri would have been fine without that element. She would have still I think, been in pain for her brother, regardless of whether her mom survived or not. So I didn't love the choice, despite it being still a very powerful scene. And she is just so good in that movie, Angela Bassett, that I was upset that we weren't going to get more of her. I was like,
Yeah.
damn, like, she's so good. So, um,
Yeah, Dill. I agree with everything that you said.
yeah,
I literally wrote down in my notes. I was like, that death meant nothing to me. Like, it was just like it just felt so, just like in a word, just like useless. Because I was just like, we didn't like, we already had, like, the death of a different character to kind of be, like, the driving force because, like, Marvel movies and Disney movies, they love to kill off parents, because that's, like, that starts the main character's, redemption arc or, revenge arc or whatever it may be. It's the driving force for the 3rd act of the movie, but we didn't need that in this one, and maybe I feel like it would have been more rewarding if she was just injured and, like you said, like, maybe just, like,
yeah.
unconscious for a
Like, give
period
her
of
a coma.
time.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
comas
put
are
her in
bad,
a
but like,
coma,
mhm,
but, something where that she could come back from, and
mhm.
then, you
And
know
and I said I said this when we were watching the Ant-Man and the Wasp trailer before this, before the movie started. I said, "They gotta be killing off Hank Pym at some point just because these older actors are getting older, and when you're younger stars, like when Chadwick Boseman passes away, it's tragic and stuff, but, like, you also have stars that are approaching their 80s, 90s, like, they're getting older, and Angela Bassett's not quite there yet, but, like, Angela Bassett's
Mhm.
an older actor, so I get maybe they just wanted to be like, "You know what? We're not gonna like make you do all these movies. Like you're like you've done your part. Good. We're gonna give you a send off. But I think there's also a way to send off a character without killing them. But also like
Mhm.
they're gonna have to start thinking about that because as actors get older, you risk the chance of them sadly leaving us before their time in the franchise is due. And I think that's the fault of franchise filmmaking in general. Is like, I mean, look at Harry Potter. They needed to make 7 or 8 movies, but Richard Harris died 2 movies in, and they're like, well, we got to just recast him. And that point you can because Dumbledore's such a distinctive looking guy that like you can make him look different, but or
Mhm.
make him look kind of the same through even with different actors. But in this sense, it's like like I can see how maybe they're older actors they want to kind of phase out to kind of just give them the opportunity to just kind of not be bogged down to a franchise for the rest of their career and because they're getting older and you never know. But again, like it just didn't feel like the time and place for her to go.
So let me ask you this then, Dill. Do you think that the movie would have been more successful had they just recast Black Panther?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. No,
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 no.
I don't mean to sound, like, accusatory. I'm
No, no,
just
no, no.
curious.
I disagree. No. I think
Okay,
that this was the right move, and
okay.
we'll see though. We still have. I think the whole point of this movie was that we still have a Black Panther and we still have a T'Challa. And we'll talk about that. We don't have
Oh,
T'Challa
yeah.
as the Black Panther, so I think that was also the point. Is like he's gone, and I think if they had recast him, that would have been really disrespectful because
Mhm.
in Harry Potter, like I said, like it's an older actor and that series is already written. So we need that character. You can't rewrite the series
Right.
to have Dumbledore die off
Yeah.
screen in Prisoner of Azkaban.
Yeah, fair
Whereas,
enough.
and again, he has such a distinctive look. You could put the beard on him, whatever. I think this case, it's like he is the head of the franchise of the Black Panther movies. He is such a beloved actor, and he died so young and so tragically. It's not like he was an old man that like Thunderbolt Ross. They're recasting William Hurt, which I don't love. They're recasting him to Harrison Ford. I
Mhm,
don't love
mhm.
that, but it's also like he is old. So like if you're gonna do that, do it with an older character like that. You can pay legacy to. Like this it would have felt distasteful if they had just another up and coming young Hollywood black celebrity play T'Challa as we know him. I think that would have been awful. But that still would have been better than CGI, and I'm glad they did neither of those things.
Yeah.
But as we
Yeah.
see, we still have a T'Challa, and that is T'Challa's son, T'Challa. And I really
Oh,
liked that moment.
right.
I thought it was a very sweet moment. Nakia, we haven't really
Sure.
talked much about because she kind of serves a similar purpose. She's about communication, and she very much feels more of a supporting role, which is fine. We get a lot of great stuff with her as her character in the trauma stuff. I think she's most successful in that, not as much the action stuff. But again, like that's always been her thing. Is she's been more like low key, more peaceful, tranquil. I liked how she wasn't wearing green when we first saw her because she couldn't. I don't think she can move past his death. And then as soon as she comes back to Wakanda, she's wearing green. I was like,
Mm.
haha, that's a good choice.
Nice, because we
But yeah,
tracked that in the first
yeah.
movie.
But at the end, we find out that she and T'Challa had a kid, but they kept him separate from Wakanda because he didn't want him roped up in all this Wakandan stuff, and they had their own private ceremony to say farewell to him, and then he reveals that his name is T'Challa, and I think that's sweet because then it's like
Mhm.
we could still have a T'Challa as like a
Mhm.
remembrance of him, but it doesn't have to be the T'Challa we knew. We could still pay respect and grieve him while also accepting this new T'Challa and now accepting a new Black Panther with Shuri. So we have a new Black Panther, we have a new T'Challa, but that doesn't take away from the old. We're not recasting. We're simply just moving forward and through legacy having this new character. But what did you
Right.
think of this mid credit scene?
Um, I agree. I thought it was sweet. I thought that it was like a nice way to, have Shuri kind of have like still keep a connection between her and her brother because it's like, oh my god, now I have a nephew, and it's like this will be my way of still kind of having
Hmm.
like a resemblance of my brother around, which was great. At the same time, I kind of just went cool. What does this mean now? Like,
Yeah.
this is a kid. Like, are we gonna, 20 movies later, this kid's gonna be old enough to like take on the mantle of being Black Panther? Like, I was like,
See, I don't think that's what it was
I don't get
trying
it.
trying to do, though. I think this
Okay.
movie was to show that T'Challa doesn't need to be the Black Panther. The Black Panther could be anyone, and that's I think the thing is I think he's just going to be a kid. Like I don't think he needs to grow up to
Okay.
be a hero unless they do go that route. But then it's like then we're gonna have to do a major time jump, and they're gonna have to put old age makeup on Winston Duke and Letitia Wright and Lupita Nyong'o. And like I don't think they're gonna do that. Um,
Right.
so I think he'll still remain a kid for at least the time being, for at least the next few phases. Um, but I do like how they're kind of again, if we're looking at an overall theme of Phase Four, I mean Wanda and her kids, Thor and his kid. Now we have a kid for T'Challa. Like it's like everyone's kind of getting a kid. Morgan Stark is now a kid. We're gonna see Cassie Lang is gonna be a big part of Quantum Mania. Like I like how they're
Yes.
kind of passing it to this next generation. You know,
Yeah.
Yelena kind of taking over for her sister, and Kate Bishop being the next Hawkeye. Like I really like how they're kind of showing us this next generation of heroes, even if it takes a while for them to become the superhero team. Like I think Young Avengers is coming. I think it's inevitable, but
Mm.
like um, I think this is a cool start, and I don't necessarily think this T'Challa will be part of it, but it's just cool to see that like as just a little wink of like his legacy still goes on and moves on. But it was kind of sad. That was actually the ending is where I actually did tear up because I was like finally getting that emotion.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oof, man, that's a
Another
blow."
moment in
Hmm.
silence still
Hmm.
where Shuri's just sitting on the beach and she's just contemplating everything that happened, and we're getting flashbacks of her and Chadwick together. I was like, "Oh, this is soul crushing. This is
Hmm.
absolutely so heartbreaking."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Damn, this this really hits."
Yeah. So another question I have: what do you think the future now is for like the Namor stuff? Because they kind of tease it to where he's like, kind of a changed guy. He's now willing to work with the Wakandans. So we think we're going to see more of him, or do you think this is like kind of a one-off? Because he does kind of have the growth of like they kind of come to an understanding.
Mhm.
Um, but at the end, they give him like a nice little scene. Like I feel like movie had too many endings. Like they kind of kept tacking on
Sure.
endings to the ending.
Yeah.
Um, but like, where do you think now with Namor? Like, where do you think they go from here? Do you think we see more of him? Do you like him enough to see more of him? Like, what do you think of his overall story? Any spoiler talk with that?
I like him a lot, actually.
Hmm.
I really like the actor's performance of this role. I liked like the style and the aesthetics of his character, and I really like, the things that he stood for, and I can see where where he's coming from this entire movie. I could see honestly a situation deal where it's like the Wakandans get in trouble with something and then they have to like turn for him for help. You know what I
Kind of
mean?
like the M'Baku thing. Yeah.
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 Yeah, so I
Well,
guess we've kind of already seen that storyline then, haven't we?
yeah. I
And can
mean,
I
but it's different. I just want to say one thing about M'Baku while we're on it.
Oh,
The
yeah,
end.
sure,
The
me too.
love M'Baku, but the ending where he's like, "I would like to challenge." I'm like, that's a fun little like throwback, but also like I talked to you after the theater about this part.
Yeah, you were like,
I
"Challenge
was like,
who?"
challenge you. Like he just literally said the queen sends her regards. She's off doing stuff. She was off meeting her son, but I was or her nephew. But I was like, it just didn't make sense to me. I was like, why are you coming in
Sure.
and challenging? Like unless. In that case, if it's a joke, he should be like, "I'm coming to challenge," and he'd be like, "Ah, I'm just kidding, I'm kidding." Like that would have been fine. But then he's just like, "I'm here to challenge," dun, 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 and then it's like cut
And then
to
it, like,
Shuri, and I'm like,
cuts.
So is he now back to like, I want to get the throne, or evil M'Baku? Is he back, or is he just messing around, toying around? Like, it didn't make sense to me. I was like, that was a stupid scene they didn't need to add.
Yeah, I understand.
They just didn't need that whole ending where they just could have cut right to Shuri going to Haiti. They didn't need, this whole plane coming in, and then M'Baku stepping out and be like, the queen is not coming. She sends her regards, but I would like to challenge for the throne. I'm like, okay, what? That scene just seemed random. It was just kind of like, oh, let's tack on another ending. It didn't need
Sure.
to be there, even though I think M'Baku had some good stuff in this. I think we got a lot of him as like more of a ruler, which was kind of cool to kind of see him like spearheading this conversation. I liked how when the
Yeah.
whole throne room was destroyed, they kind of went to his icy throne room to kind of be like the meeting place with the
Yeah.
guy with the lip that I still don't like.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool, but again, like that last scene was weird. What else do you have to say, Kels?
I was just gonna say, Jill, I know you hate when I do this, but whenever Shuri and M'Baku had a scene together, I was like, I'm picking up on some vibes.
Okay, so here's what I gotta say. I was getting that vibe with someone else. When this is where I thought I was going.
Okay, go
When
ahead.
when when Namor took Shuri underwater, I was getting some mad like
You were getting
sexual tension there.
chemistry from
Namor and
Namor
Shuri,
and
yeah, because
Shuri?
he was like
Yeah.
putting the beads on, giving her the bracelet. I was like, "Ooh,
Yeah,
this is sexy."
yeah.
And honestly, I'm wondering if they didn't have the Chadwick Boseman stuff to deal with, if they were gonna go full fledged, like maybe she's gonna. Here's what I imagine the original version might have been.
Okay.
She gets taken. Okoye is blamed or whatever. Chadwick or T'Challa has to go and try to save Shuri with maybe with Nakia or whatever, and then um Nakia Shuri ends up like kind of going to the dark side. She kind of like falls in love with Namor, and they start like this kind of uprising against
Mm.
them. And T'Challa has to kind of bring Shuri back, and that's where you get Ramonda's death and all that stuff. And that's when Shuri kind of comes to her senses and has to battle Namor and stuff. Like I honestly thought it would have been cooler to have like Shuri kind of fully go to the dark side and then kind of turn. But I get with the
Sure.
Chadwick Boseman stuff, you couldn't really go that route because then it would have been a
Yeah.
little too much. And just there's only so much story to tell in 3 hours. But yeah, like I was picking up on some vibes with Namor and Shuri. But then again, it's like, does she need a man? Who knows? Who's to say? I definitely
Listen,
wasn't
when
picking up M'Baku, but I was picking up because M'Baku still feels more brotherly to her. But hey, I don't know.
maybe. I don't know. I thought that it was sweet that he was, like, looking out for her.
Mhm.
Listen, when I say things like this, it's not because I feel like they need to be together. I'm just
No,
saying,
you know what?
superheroes deserve some happiness too.
Well, that's the thing is we barely see superheroes in those relationships recently. Like I feel like we haven't gotten a lot of that. We got some in Eternals, but um, right? Like I
We
feel
got
like
some relationship conversations with, Jennifer Walters with She-Hulk.
well, true, yeah, yeah,
She
that
has
too.
a
But
very active dating life, and I'm very
mhm.
happy for her.
Yeah, but I just feel like these people who are such big like heroes and celebrities, like I feel like all of them would be pretty, you know, well set. Like have a lot of people like fawning over them. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it'd be easy to find a pair. I don't know. Shuri. So let us know in the comments. Do you ship Shuri and Namor or Shuri and M'Baku? Let us know. Um, but yeah, I do think that was interesting. We got to talk about Martin Freeman now in spoilers though, because we obviously find out that
Oh,
he's
right.
working alongside
I almost
Valentina,
completely
Julia
forgot about this.
Louis-Dreyfus. Didn't expect to see her in this movie only because
No,
I was
didn't
like,
at all.
and honestly, we didn't need her. I really do think just their relationship, and then they dropped the whole like news of like, oh, we used to be married, which was totally out of
Yes.
nowhere. But the problem is they never follow up on that. And like, if this movie was all
For
about them,
that's for future projects still.
like but that's the thing is like, do I want to see a teaser? Then put it in a future project. Like
No, I know.
make,
I know
and they
you
should have
mean.
had at least one conversation about why their marriage failed, and then maybe one about like, but you're a good guy. Like I have respect for you. All that. Like it was just so weird because it was like she was like sticking up for him. She was like, no, he's the expert, but also like, but we used to
Yeah.
be married. Da, 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 da. I'm like, I don't know. It's like they didn't go anywhere with their story, and like at
Sure.
that point, just cut it, like, or make it a post credits. No, I guess not a post credits for here because it's like I don't think any post credits would have really like fit the vibe of this movie. But like make it like maybe an ending scene where Everett Ross calls someone and it's like and it's Julia Louis Dreyfus and she's like we got to talk a lot. And she's like we haven't talked since our divorce or whatever. And he's like yeah. Like it just was weird that like they showed it early on. They revealed that information, and they didn't really follow up on anything. Like they didn't have an arc with the two of them, and then she just kind of disappears, and that's it. Like it was weird.
Yeah.
Didn't think we needed her or them, even though I like them both individually as actors. I like their characters, but I did not need them together, especially because she didn't end up recruiting anyone either, which is her whole thing. She's recruiting essentially the Thunderbolts, what it seems like, with
Right.
John Walker and Yelena, and like it just did not make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't really get from everything that we've seen her in before, which is really just the end credit scene of Black Widow and Falcon
Falcon
Winter
Winter Soldier.
Soldier. I didn't get that she like worked for the CIA the same way Everett Ross does.
Yeah, I thought she was her own little
I
entity.
thought that she
like,
was
her
just
own
like she just
Nick
went
Fury.
rogue and like did whatever she wanted.
Mhm.
She worked for like her own agency.
Yeah,
But
I think that's one of those things also where like she probably would have had a bigger effect had they not lost Chadwick and they needed to like just go with the original story. Maybe she would have had a bigger effect, but I think that's the thing is like they had to tell this important story, which they should have. Like I said earlier, this should have been the priority. But in that case, then let this side plot go. Find a way to get Martin Freeman to Wakanda or whatever. Have him working alongside Riri Williams or something in building the tech or whatever. Like give him something else or cut him all together and have him in a future movie because they didn't need him. They really didn't. I get it. We like his character, but it's like his storyline. It's probably 20 minutes of screen time that took away from the rest and would have made, I think, the movie flow a lot better. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
yeah,
I know you disagree, but it's okay. Yeah, I know it's tough.
you
It's a
know I
mixed
like
bag.
him.
It's hard to be critical of a film that exists for other reasons than simply to entertain and be a superhero movie. Like this is a tough task, like I said, for Ryan Coogler to do this and make it a fitting tribute. But I think, like I said, what he does with the tribute is good, and is the best part of the movie. It's just some of the other threads, like the Okoye getting a suit, and just having Ironheart in general, and the Julia Louis-Dreyfus. It seems like they're still trying so hard to like continue on the franchise, and I'm like, just let it be its own movie. And especially as the end of Phase 4, I'm like, just let it be its own like final thing.
Yeah.
But I get it. So yeah, that's kind of all the spoiler thoughts
We
I have.
really
Anything
ended
else?
phase 4 on like a somber note.
Yeah,
Like
we
it's
did.
really bittersweet because it's like, you know what? My friend texted me and was like, "Hey, did you see Black Panther? What'd you think?" And I was like, you know, at the end of the day, it was really sad because I feel like now his death is really final. And I know it's been really final for like obviously like his loved
Mhm,
ones and people who are close to him, but just like as a fan of this franchise, like now it's like it was like we got What If and then we were all looking forward to this and like now that's it for him.
mhm.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So
And now we're gonna have it be
it's
like
tough.
you said, it's now permanent in the MCU. So where now I think
Mhm.
other characters are probably gonna comment on it. I'd love to see in like the next like Avengers movie if like there's a moment where they just all kind of sit around and remember Tony and Natasha and T'Challa. Like I think that'd be
Sure,
cool.
yeah.
Just because like I like the other characters' relationships with him too. Um, so there we go. Any final thoughts? I mean, we're done with spoilers. That's our review. We can talk about the Ant-Man trailer, which we still haven't talked about on here, but honestly, I kind of don't remember a lot of it. Just remembering that Kang looks kind of cool. It looks a little too visually busy. There looks like a little too much CGI, and I'm excited for it. And I don't like
Still, we haven't seen this movie yet. You already have complaints.
no, just because like it's all like quantum realm CGI.
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
know
okay,
it's
so
all
it's
in the
gonna be
quantum realm.
it looks like a video game a little bit, but it's okay. Like
Maybe,
it still looks cool, but I don't know.
sure.
Are you
Well,
excited for it? Any thoughts on it?
I'm excited for it. I feel I can't help but like this is so weird and like no one else is gonna think of this except for me. But I just can't help but feel sorry for the young actor who is cast as Cassie in Endgame and how she's like not like that I feel bad for
Listen, I
her.
love Catherine Newton. She's amazing. Like
Yeah,
literally in
yeah.
everything she does. Big Little Lies and Detective Pikachu. She's great in. But Freaky, a really awesome body swap horror movie.
Yeah.
But come on, like this girl had a gig and like it took it
Yeah.
away. And I get if like she just isn't that great of an actress, but then don't cast her anyway. But she was a good
Yeah.
actress. She had that moment with Scott in Endgame. I was like, ooh, that's
Mhm.
really a nice moment. So I was like,
And I
damn, that
think that
sucks.
that actor looked more like,
The
you
young
know,
Cassie.
Judy Greer and Paul Rudd than
Mm-hmm.
or and
And Catherine
also
Newton.
the young Cassie.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have Catherine Newton.
Yeah, so
I
we'll
was
see.
I was a little disappointed to hear about this recast, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's going to be the big kickoff to Phase 5. I can't believe we're done with Phase 4 in 2 weeks. But in 2 weeks, we will be getting a Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, which we'll talk about. But between now and then, we need an episode for next week. I think it's
Hmm.
time. It's Thanksgiving. Why don't we eat some food, Kels?
Hey, I like where your head's at, Dill. I
We are
love this
going to,
idea.
and we know we have some sound sensitive people. I know that have listened, especially with our Wings episode of like the whole like talking and chewing thing. It's a real thing. My sister has misophonia. It's kind of like the thing where like crunching and slurping noises get to you, and I get it. Don't do it now. Don't do it now for our viewers. Don't do it now. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's an actual like thing. It's an actual medical disease. But no, like that's a thing for people. So we're gonna be mindful of that. We're not gonna use a microphone because we don't want to be like ASMRing eating into the mic. What we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be preparing some dishes.
Sorry.
Stop it,
I'm
Kels. Like
sorry.
that's disrespectful. No, but like we're gonna be like trying different types of foods from the MCU. We're gonna be eating some shawarma. We're gonna be eating
Mm,
a cheeseburger or I'm gonna be eating a cheeseburger from Burger King just to monument Iron Man 2 or Iron Man. I forget which one.
Iron
Kelsey,
Man.
what's up?
It's the
The first
first
one.
movie.
Yep. We'll be eating
Or
a lot of
Endgame with
yeah.
Morgan
We'll be eating a lot of other eccentric dishes, including the dish that I can't remember the name of that Vision was making in Civil War. We're going to be making
Pepper
that too.
Cash.
Pepper Cash. And we are also going to be eating the long-awaited ice cream pizza from Miss Marvel that I cannot wait for.
Ew.
We're going to be putting ice cream on pizza, vanilla on tomato. It's going to be disgusting, but we're looking forward to it. And we will, like I said, be mindful not to be chewing and eating too much while talking to help you viewers out there. I'm going to edit it so it's like more of a cut episode rather than just a full range open podcast. It's going to be a little bit shorter, a little bit more fun and playful as a fun
Yeah.
little Thanksgiving treat to say, let's taste the MCU. Like eating through the MCU is going to
Eating
kind of be
through
the
the
title.
MCU. I love it.
Kind of gross, but it's like Pac-Man. Up, MCU. Eating through
Yeah.
the MCU. But we'll be doing that next week, and then the week after we will have a review for the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, and then December rolls around, which means we're going to be doing some end of year wrap up of like maybe ranking the Phase 4 movies and shows we've seen. Also, maybe doing an updated villains ranking with the villains we've gotten, and then of course a title match is going to be coming. We had 10 episodes of our regular season, and now our big season finale will be coming in December, where Kelsey will be taking on Noah. We don't have any more matches until then. This is it. Like this is the match. We're not having November matches because we want this to be a pure study month, an off month, and because we have a lot of stuff
Thank you,
going
Jill.
on
I
in November.
appreciate that.
And so we are constantly cranking out questions, Zach and I, trying to shape up that match for you and Noah. And we're doing a collaboration process. We're throwing it back and forth because we want to make sure it's even, well-rounded, but also tricky because it is a title match. And then in January we'll go on a little bit of a hiatus after that title match and go on a little hiatus. Just give us some weeks off in the Christmas and January break, also because I'm busy performing. And then early January, mid-January, we'll be back with our inaugural first episode of our second season of Marvel Trivia, our third season of Marvel-ous Movie Mondays, where Zach will be taking on, I believe, JD, and the winner of that will be playing the winner of Malcolm and Stacy for a shot at Kelsey. It's going to be a big, long thing, but Zach and JD will be the opener of season 2 of Trivia, season 3 of the show, in January. So, anything else I'm forgetting, Kels? Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. You looked a little confused, but I think it's because
We'll talk off air.
okay. Yeah, so I wanted to start off the year with the title match, but I was like, if we're going to end December on a title match, I don't want you to do back-to-back months of title matches. So the next title match will probably be like March, April after that. If you win, if Noah wins, it will also be like March, April. I shouldn't just say it as if it's going to be you necessarily. It could be anyone. But
Who
yeah,
could
so
say?
January we're going to start with JD and Zach. We already teased that in the last episode.
Mhm.
Anything else I'm forgetting? No, I don't think so. Kels, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Kelsey A. Kilpatrick. You could follow me on TikTok, Cause13, or you could subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Yep,
I
and
almost
you can
said
find
subscribe to my YouTube video.
it's okay. Do that too. You can find me at Dylan_Randazzo on Twitter, Dylan_Randazzo417 at TikTok, and Dill Pickle Movie Network, where you can find this show and so many other great shows this month on Picture This. We are doing the year 2009 in celebration of the new Avatar movie. We are going to be talking about the original Avatar and all the nominees for Best Picture that year, including Up and other movies. And then on Frame Rec, we're going to be talking about Mac and Me, which is the ripoff of E.T., the childhood favorite of mine, which I do not know if I'm going to like it as much on a rewatch all these years later. We'll see. And what else? What other shows? Recipe for Reality. We're in full Survivor mode. Survivor is still plowing along. It's been a great season so far. And yep, and we'll be eating food here next week. So that is
Nice.
all from me. That's all from Kels. We'll see you next time.